Hi, Julien here from NTradeX, and for the first time we're taking your questions, and we're going to be talking about waste today, right? It's not a very sexy subject, but it obviously affects us all. And go ahead, what are the questions we collected over the last week? It's not the plastic that is the problem. It's very clear. It's the people who throw it away. It's the people that don't build an infrastructure for it. And it's the problem that people use far too much plastic. I believe that we could cut 50% of our plastic consumption. It would make absolutely no difference to our quality of life or whatsoever. It's not necessary that every single time I want to buy a coffee to go, I don't just only get the cup, right? I also get the plastic bag, but immediately take it out of it once I leave the store, start drinking it, throw it away. So, I mean, that's not even single-use plastic. That's like 2-minute use plastic. So let's cut 50% of the plastic. It's great because it's light, it's easy to produce, it doesn't take a lot of energy to produce, and it's pretty good from a technical perspective because we can turn it into electricity, heating and cooling quite easily, right? It's not that complex. But we need to have infrastructures in place that treat the waste right where it's created. Within the communities, within smaller areas, so it doesn't even end up on the landfill. The moment it ends up in the landfill, especially like places like Southeast Asia, gets washed into the ocean, and then it's pretty much too late, right? So let's reduce the amount of plastic used and treat the rest. I think biodegradable plastics are a good beginning. I think they have a very small percentage right now in the market. But if we look at reducing plastic waste by 50%, there are going to be some plastic waste streams we cannot avoid. So let's make those biodegradable if it's possible. And if in a few years from now we don't have enough plastic anymore to turn into energy, I would be very happy, right? We'd have a major problem solved. And so let's make it as sustainable as possible. We treat the rest for as long as you need us. Ultimately, we try to dispose of any waste on site that is possible for us to treat without causing any harmful emissions. And plastic treating is actually not that difficult compared to many other agricultural fuels, so it has evolved over time. We started with wood waste, then we're moving into agricultural waste, which is producing big problems because if you set a field on fire, for example, with straw, you have massive smoke emissions. It's really bad for your lungs. And then we move into plastic waste, nylon, rubber, everything else. Ultimately, the big challenge will be to use mixed waste, contaminated waste, because in reality, you often don't have separated waste streams. It all comes together. So when you're at a landfill, you're never going to have 100% plastic. You're going to have 70% biological waste, some plastic in there, some paper in there. And the easiest to remove is the bowling ball, right? But it's going to be a mixture, a blend of different waste streams, and our technology has the potential to treat all of that at the same time and turn it into clean electricity, heating and cooling, something useful right on site without causing any harmful emissions.
Right.
When I first time came to Bali, for example, I was shocked. I was shocked how much plastic you find everywhere. You find plastic bags in the trees. And it's not because people go up there and hang their plastic bags in the trees. It's far too much effort. But we live in an environment here where the standard of living is going up all the time. People need more and more energy. Big cities are growing more and more. So there's demand for infrastructure projects right now that a lot of these countries cannot handle as fast as they need to. So especially in rural areas, there currently is no waste disposal system or waste treatment system set up. So what happens? In the best case scenario, everything ends up in the landfill. It rains for 2 or 3 days and then it washes into the ocean. Then in the best case scenario, people pick it off the ocean again, bring it back to the landfill. And it's like a totally stupid cycle of rotating your waste around, and too much of it ends up ultimately in the ocean. And Southeast Asia, with so many beaches and so many tourists and such a lack of infrastructure in rural areas at this point, has massive, massive challenges. Singapore, a little bit different, right? It's a small city state, so they have pretty good disposal infrastructure. But if you look at Indonesia, if you look at the Philippines, if you look at Thailand, you go to the beach, you're going to have waste everywhere. It's unnecessary. The tourists don't want it, the people don't want it, the fish don't want it, and their technical solution to make all of this go away. We just need a joint effort of people in the region, governments, hotels, tourists, to just get rid of it, and it's going to be much better for the environment, for the beaches, for the tourists, and we're all going to benefit from it.
Right. Do you think there are large-scale solutions that we can approach the government with so that they're more aware, more concerned about this problem?
I think on government regulation, we need to make sure that people, that communities, that are hotels, that are businesses are responsible for their own waste. So in India, for example, we have a case now that if you do a new building development, you need to prove to the government what is going to happen to the food waste. right? You can't just say somebody's going to pick it up. It's not good enough anymore. The same thing needs to happen with all of our waste streams. So if you're having a supermarket, be responsible what's going to happen in your community with the waste. And it's quite easy. We have all the technical solutions, not just us, available today at our disposal to really turn this waste into something useful and curb the pollution and everything else. But it's just not used. So we need policymakers to either ban plastic overall if it's unnecessary, or at least force businesses and consumers into a situation where it's not out of mind, out of sight, out of mind, where it's not out of sight, out of mind, but actually there's a solution behind it, that the waste never ends up on a landfill, because a poorly managed landfill in Southeast Asia is not the place for the waste to be. From there, it will end up in the ocean sooner or later. I am a big fan of the Friday for Future movement, because it kind of shows how we as a generation are failing and how our parents' generation has failed miserably at sustainability. We spend a lot of time talking about it, but to be quite honest, ever since I was a child, we knew what problems we're going to have, right? Plastic waste has not been around since yesterday. It's something around that was around when it's a child. We know for a long time about global warming, we know a long time about carbon emissions, we know a long time where our energy generation needs to mature to in order to make a real difference. We have done not enough. I think we have been pretty much as a generation a total disaster. Our goals are far not ambitious enough. Whatever little we achieve gets eaten up by higher standards of living all the time. So I think as a policymaker, as an entrepreneur, as a father to my family, I think we have really not done enough, and we deserve to be kicked in the ass by these young kids to simply demand more from us, to get out of our complacency and really tackle the global problems that we have and get out of this mindset where we deal with all this stupid bullshit. We have time for Instagram and everything else, but nobody has time to really solve the major problems. And I think it's maybe the kick in the ass that we really needed.
Right, that's all that we have today. Thank you, Julien.
Thank you, my pleasure. So reach out to us, ask us questions for next week. Next week, we're going to talk about the stupidest, useless waste that you can find on this planet. It's food waste, right? There should be no food waste in this world. It's ruining our resources. We need far too much land for it. So let's get rid of it and let's see what we can do together to build a movement to really solve the problems that we have as a society right now. There's so much to be done. We're waiting forward for your comments, and we talk to you soon. Thank you very much. My name is Julien, and we're out.